All right, guys, welcome back to Throwing Wrenches Garage. I'm Tom.
And I'm Declan.
Ooh, that was a smooth one. We're getting good at this. We're it's like 6 months in, we're finally getting smooth.
About time.
It takes us a little while, but we get there eventually. Okay, guys, so we are back on the Chevelle today, but we're back on the Chevelle with purposes for the IROC, if that makes sense, because we're doing a little bit of work on the engine before we get ready to pull it out. And so I'm going to explain this for you guys, but really I'm going to explain it to Declan because I really haven't given him much of a heads up on what we're doing. I just kind of said, hey, come on downstairs. We're going to be doing a compression test on the engine. So here's what this means. I've never done a compression test on this engine. It's always run fine, so I've never really felt the real urgency to do it. And realistically speaking, unless you want to rig up, as Derek calls it, a lone wolf, a little remote starter, then there's no good way to do this alone. You have to do it with a second person. And I just never got around to doing it. So we're going to do a compression test on the engine now because you really can't effectively do a good compression test when the engine is out of the car. You can do a leak down test, and we will do that when the engine is out of the car. But you can't really do a compression test when the engine is out of the car. So we're going to do that before we pull the engine. So Declan, what a compression test is doing, you know, because I've told you a million times, right? The 4 stages, right? There's suck, squeeze, bang, blow, right? Well, it's the squeeze, the compression part that we're testing for here. Okay. So there's several components inside here that can take away compression. You've got those piston rings around the piston, which can be worn or broken or missing. And if there's anything wrong with them, then you can get leaks around the piston, and that can rub compression, right? Then you've got your valves and valve seals and valve guides. Those can have pressure issues, and you can have leaks around those as well.
A lot of issues can be had.
There's a lot of things that can happen that can cause you to lose a bit of compression. And to make it more complicated, you can have issues on one cylinder and not another cylinder. So what we're going to do here with the compression test, and what we are really trying to accomplish today, is just to try to understand, are these cylinders close to each other? So we don't really know the benchmark for this engine. I don't have all the specs on the engine, so I don't know what each cylinder should be making for compression. So there's no way I can benchmark it and say that each cylinder should be making 170 pounds of compression. No idea. So we're not looking for a specific number. What we're looking to try to do is to make sure that each cylinder is showing a similar amount of compression to each other. Okay. So we want to be within 10, maybe on the outside 15% of each one. To do that, we're going to do a couple of things, and let's take you along for the ride and show you what we're going to do. We'll swing the camera around. So one of the things I already did in preparation for this is I already warmed up the engine. That's important. The reason why you want to warm it up, and this is part of the reason why this is like pretty impossible to do when the engine is out of the car, is you want to warm it up to make sure that all the piston rings are nice and soaked with oil and warmed up and up to temperature so that you have as much sealing in all the parts that will seal as you realistically can. That way you're sort of ensuring that the engine is going to be pretty much at operating compression anyway, instead of working to a deficit, right? If you did this when the engine was really cold, you'd get less compression because everything would be cold. What we're doing here is we're just sort of wedging the butterfly open. And this is just going to ensure that we want to reduce vacuum or reduce resistance. So I took all the spark plugs out and disconnected all the spark plug wires, obviously. So that's going to mean that it's going to be easier for the engine to turn over because there won't be spark plugs plugging up holes. It's also going to mean that it's going to be easier on the starter to turn the motor over, and it's going to be more consistent. So instead of only one plug being out at a time where the engine might turn over and go, it should be more consistent as it turns over. Okay. And then we're going to jam this butterfly open here just to make sure that we've got we are keeping those butterflies on the carburetor open so that air can get in there nice and easy. Okay. And so now what we're going to do is run the compression tester. This is our handy dandy little compression tester. This is nothing but basically an air gauge. So this has a little fitting that screws in where the spark plug was in the head. And as the engine turns over, this is going to push this needle and it's going to bounce around up here. I'll show you. I'm going to screw it into the spark plug hole. And it's just really finger tight in here. We're not wrenching it down. And come on over and take a look.
Are you going to paint your new engine?
No, we're going to leave that. So hang on to that. And now I'm going to turn over the key and see. I want to get the camera set up so they can see what's going on here. All right, you can see it. Camera can see it. So I'm going to turn over the engine and watch what the needle does. Did you see the needle move? So where are we at?
150.
Is that the highest that it got?
Yeah.
Okay.
It just stayed there.
All right, so now there should be a little button on the side. So it said 150.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so hit the little button. So that's cylinder 1. So I'm going to make the comment on this sheet that our first reading was 150. Now I'm going to do it again. I'm going to try to make sure that I do the same cranking speed. So there's about 6 cranks.
150.
One more time.
It's like the same.
Good.
Maybe 151, but...
Okay. That's good. We want it to be the same. Consistent is good. Okay, so now we'll take this and unscrew it. Oh, I might have screwed that in too much.
So much for don't crank it in there.
Right? Okay. Hold this. Do you want to turn the crank or you want to watch the dial?
I'll watch the dial.
Okay, there you go. Let's just make sure that this can be seen.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, here we go again.
Yeah. $150. Also, the screwdriver thing moved.
Okay, 150?
Yep.
Did you press the button?
Yeah. $150. I didn't even do that. That was you.
Back down to 0?
Yeah. $150.
So far, so good. Consistent is good. All right, so let me get this unscrewed.
There's going to be one that's like 175 or something.
Yeah, I hope not. Although if we're going to have like most of them be at 150 and one of them is really high, I'd probably prefer that to one of them being really low.
Your engine space looks a lot more spacious than mine.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot less going on. Okay. Every time.
This one's a little less.
What's that?
Like 140.
I would, let's see. That's 125. So 30, 35, 40, 45. So I'd call that 143.
Around the same.
Again.
Same.
Same. All right. Well, at least it's consistent with itself. There we go. Okay, okay. Try again. Last one on this side.
Like 156.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Around the same. Maybe 160.
Yeah, I call it 160. Or 158 at least. Let's call it 158.
It's about the same.
158?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let me get in there and unscrew that.
You have a card in here.
Yeah, I know. I just realized that when I was doing this work. Can you get it out?
Yeah.
That was from the last show that we went to. You know, I put them out like on top of the radiator,
Yeah.
and it was really windy,
And they blew.
and they
everywhere.
blew all over the place. And I thought I got them all, but apparently I didn't. So now we're on to cylinder 2.
What's your guess?
I'm gonna guess at 150. That seems like a safe guess.
Okay.
What do you see?
I'd say no.
Ooh, nah, not good.
No, not even one. 80, 85, 89, maybe 88.
I call it 190. I call it 90. All right, let's try that again. Make sure that's tight in there. Yeah, that's tight, unfortunately.
$124.
124. So we
Yeah.
went from 90 to 124.
Yeah.
That's weird.
$131.
All right, I'm gonna go one more
Okay.
just to see if that 90 was just weird.
$144.
That's all right. That's weird. Huh?
Just slowly increasing.
Yeah. Why would it keep climbing?
I don't know.
All right, I'm gonna have to figure that out. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. Why would I wouldn't? It would make sense to me that it sort of dances around a little bit, but
But it literally went like.
why it
it
would
went
keep
here,
climbing a ladder,
here,
I don't
here,
know.
here. Slowly went up.
And that's like a big ladder to climb to go from 90 up to 144.
Yeah.
So part of the reason why we're doing this, Declan, is just to see how healthy this motor really is, and to see if we need to do any sort of rebuilding to it when we take it out. So to see if we need to do anything to the valves or the valve seals, or if we need to replace rings, things like that.
Okay.
This should help us understand that. Okay. Ready to do number 4.
Well, what do you guess for this one?
I have no guesses now.
Expect the unexpected. 132. Actually, because it's 125. 150, 135. 136 or so.
136, you think?
Maybe 7. Because it's a
say-
little over.
I'll take 136. It's
Okay.
fine.
About the same.
About the same? Thank God. Something's staying consistent now.
$135.
All right. That's what I would expect. In the same neighborhood, not dancing all over the
In the
place.
same neighborhood, but not the same house.
Okay. Cylinder 6. Coming in hot.
$37.
What's that?
37 or so. Or 140.
I would call that 142.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Same.
Same.
Yep.
One more time.
A little bit more. Like one more.
143.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on to the last cylinder. All right. Last hole. No fire in the hole.
Oh, not yet.
Ready?
Yeah. $141.
Here it comes.
143.
One more time.
143.
All right, so now it's time to do mathematicals. Let's see here. So now we'll take an average of all of these numbers to see where that sorts out. So cylinder 1's easy. That was 150. Cylinder 2 is easy. That's one. Sorry, cylinder 3 is easy. That's 152. 150 again. Cylinder 5 is easy. That's 143. Cylinder 7, we got 156. You get your calculator?
Mm-hmm.
We got 156
Okay.
plus 158 plus 158 divided by 3.
Isn't that like... Oh, okay. Right.
It's going to be...
Okay, wait. That didn't work. 138 plus 158
divided by 3. Yeah.
157.
157.3.
I did it, and it came up with 300 and something. I was like, well, that's not right.
All right, so now we're going to do all 4 of these because, actually, let's discount the 90. That's weird. So 124 plus 131 plus 144 divided by 3.
133.
133. That's a down hole for sure. Then 136, 136, 135.
135.6.
Then 142, 142, 143.
142.3.
And then 141, 143, 143.
Divided by 3. Wait, I did it wrong again. I can't combine them, otherwise it'll come out weird. Equals divided by 3, 142.3.
All right, so basically 10% of 150 would be 15, right? So that means technically that's your bad boy right there. Well, so you got more bad boys. So 157 is your high. Your low is 133.
With the 90, it would have been 122.
So you definitely got more than 10% between your highest and your lowest, which is not great. So that's 24 points between the two. So that's pretty significant. So you're down, was that like 15, 18% between those? So we're going to have to consult the Oracle. And by that, I mean Google. All right. So before we took everything out, I grabbed this box. This is the box of rotors came in. Poked some holes in it. When I took the spark plugs out, we put them back into this box in the right order so we know where everything was. And then I just wrote down the corresponding compression numbers on each one of these plugs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into the warmth of the house, which is nice and cozy, and start looking at all of these plugs and investigating them. And I'll bring you guys along for that ride too. Most of these plugs, honestly, there's not a lot of correlation between these. If I'm looking at these plugs and the numbers that are next to them, they don't make a lot of sense to me. It's not as if the high number plugs look pristine and the low number plugs look awful.
Yeah.
They're kind of all over the place. There's only 2 of these plugs that I think look pretty good. And most of these plugs,
those 2?
Yeah, and most of these plugs they've got issues. So they all look like they're fairly oil fouled. And I'm going to go ahead and guess from what little I know, because I've told you guys before, I'm no pro at reading plugs. And I'll zoom in on these once I get some clean space upstairs to go and look at these. Try to zoom in on them here, but I don't know how much you're going to be able to see from them. There is some, even without my glasses on, I can see there's some black fouling on here that is clearly oil. And can you see that it's flecked on there? Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of wet oil on these. So it's not, there's not a lot of gooey wet oil. There's flecks of oil. And usually when there's flecks of oil, that's a pretty good sign that you've got oil coming in through valve seals, because it's atomizing. It's not a lot of oil coming in. It's a little bit of oil coming in, and it's coming in when the valves are open. So it's then getting caught in that combustion cycle, and it's getting combusted with the fuel, but it doesn't really get combusted. So it's sort of atomizing and carboning up on the plugs. So I think that's what's happening on several of them. My guess is we'll have to go through and at least change valve seals on here, which is not a crazy job, especially if we've got the engine out. I haven't done it, but I know it's not a crazy job. And And then otherwise, the other thing that I'm looking at here is we've got the driver's side bank, the odd bank, 1, 3, 5, and 7. The lowest compression is 143. So we go 150, 150, 143, 157. That's all pretty healthy. I mean, the difference between 143 and 157 is right on the hairy edge of 10%. But it's still within it. So if you were just looking at these, you'd be fine and you'd say, that's good to go. Let's run it. We don't have really an issue. Then we come over here and look at this bank. And honestly, the same thing is true. This bank is within 10% of themselves. They're not that far off. So you go 133 at the low end and 142.3 at the high end. 10% would be 14 points. There's not 14 points between them. There's 9 between the highest and the lowest. So the right bank is not crazy. It's the problem is that they got to work together. So you got to look at them as a whole, and there's more than 10% difference between your lowest of the 8 and your highest of the 8. So there is definitely something going on, but it's so isolated to the banks. It makes me start to think that maybe we have something going on with one of the heads as a whole. Maybe it's a head gasket that could need replacing, or maybe it's just that we've got valve issues on one side or another. So I don't know. Maybe you guys can tweet at us or leave messages in the the space underneath with the commenty things and tell us.
Okay.
I'm losing my brain space, and you can
Comment section.
Let the comment section, and let us know what you think about what this could be. I'm open to all wisdom that you guys might have as some of the usual suspects for why you might see this sort of gapping on here. So bleep bloop, as Derek says, that in the comments if you know it. And now I'm going to go and take a look at these plugs in a little bit more detail. We'll get some zoomy pictures and see if I can sort of diagnose these a little bit further. And maybe that'll give us some more indications of what's going on here, cylinder by cylinder. All right, guys, so I'm back in the house having a chance to check into these pieces. So I got all the plugs mounted in here in the right order so I know where they came out, and I've got all the numbers written down on them. I'll throw that up in a little image so that you guys can see what's going on there. Taking a look at each one of the plugs and what I can see in the comfort of the warm house and with my spectacles on is that we do have some commonalities and that they're all looking like they're running rich. There's only a couple of plugs that don't look like they're really horribly fouled. They just look like they're sort of normally fouled. All of them have some oil on them, which, I mean, I'm looking at these and thinking that we probably have maybe ring damage issues or possibly some valve seal issues. My guess is we're probably talking about mild ring damage or some valve seal issues. The oiling that I'm seeing on these doesn't look like super wet. It looks more like it's atomized, which is kind of probably tough to see here. But usually when it's atomized, it doesn't mean there's a ton of oil in there. And this isn't eating a ton of oil, so I don't really think that this is like massively leaking rings. We're also getting decent pressure. I mean, the worst of them is at 133 pounds, and the best is at 157. So that doesn't mean things are like completely shot. So I think we're in moderately good shape. And that's the thing about looking at this. When you're looking at compression, you're really looking to see if you have anything that's way, way off on any one of these cylinders. And we do have, one cylinder that's pretty far off, 2 really that are pretty far off. You take these 2 out of the mix, and we're probably not really worried about this motor at all. But these 2 seem a little bit odd and raise some concerns. So there's a number of things that could be wrong with this. They're all running rich. I've had trouble trying to get this motor dialed in to not run rich, which could be a number of things. It could be that it's a little bit overcarbureted. It's only a 625. It's a little street demon carburetor on there, but it's a pretty anemic motor. So it might mean that we need to go and look into either changing jets on that carburetor. It could mean that maybe when we take this thing out, maybe we want to put a little bit of a healthier cam in it, bump this thing up a little bit so that it's going to be a little bit more demanding on that carburetor and use it a little bit more. It could also be that we have a worn timing chain and that maybe we don't have the right kind of timing in those valves and things aren't working right. It's a bunch of things that could be going ultimately, we're not going to determine all of that from the compression test. The compression test just tells us that we have an issue. That's all that really we're getting out of that. The plugs are just going to also tell us we have some issues, and we kind of know that we have some oiling issues, we have some rich running issues. Not going to narrow it down enough. The next step is going to be, once we pull this motor out, we're going to do a leak down test. And the leak down test is going to be sort of the opposite of the compression. The compression test, we use the engine's compression to get a reading on air pressure to tell us how much compression we had in that cylinder. When we take the motor out and we do a leak down test, we're going to actually put each cylinder at top dead center. We're going to charge it with the air pressure, and then we're going to see if it holds. If it does hold, great, cool. We move on to the next cylinder, do the same thing. If it doesn't hold, if it's leaking out and it's leaking out at a substantial amount, then we're going to listen for where that air is leaking out. Where that air is leaking out tells us where we're likely to have a problem. Is it probably the piston rings? In that case, you're probably hearing it coming out through the crankcase. Is it coming out through the exhaust valves, or is it coming out through the intake valves? This gives you an indication of where that sound is escaping, where that air is escaping, gives you an indication of where you probably have a leak in the system that you need to address. So that'll help us understand, once we have the engine out, whether we need to be looking at re-ringing the pistons, whether we need to be looking at changing the valve stem seals, or whether we need to be looking at something else. So that'll be the next step once we have the engine out. But for now, we just know that we got a little bit of attention to pay to this thing because it's not completely healthy. But I wouldn't say that this thing is sick either. So what we were really looking for, and what I would have been concerned with, is if one of these cylinders was registering, 80 or 90 PSI and the rest were at like 150. That would have been a real concern. That's a real drop off that you really have to worry about. This is pretty minor. Going from 133 to 157, it's more than the 10%. It's something you have to sort of check into. You have an issue, but it's not an issue that makes you stop driving the car. It's not an issue that makes you think, oh, we got something that's really, really hurt. It just makes you realize you got to pay a little bit of attention to this thing. It's time for some R&R. It's time for a little bit of treatment. So that's what we learned from this. Hopefully you learned a little bit of something from this compression testing, or maybe you got something to teach me. I'm open to that too. So if you guys see anything here and you're like, oh my God, Tom, I got something for you, let me know, because I'm all ears. There's always something to learn. Well, so there you have it. A little shorter video this week. We didn't go crazy with Thanksgiving this week. I'll be honest, I took a really super lazy weekend because we did so much work on Thanksgiving. So we didn't do a whole lot of work to anything except the house and cooking and stuff. So not a whole lot to go through this week. But hopefully you found this interesting. If you haven't done compression testing before, you learned a little something about that. Hopefully you learned a little bit of something about a compression test and what that is. And when we pull this motor out, we will do more to it. So that motor pull is coming. So I've got a couple of weeks coming up during the holiday shutdown. And as long as we don't have absolutely sub-freezing temperatures, my hope is that we can actually use that time to yank this motor out so that we can start getting to work on this, doing whatever it is that we need to do to make this healthy enough to put into the IROC. And I think we are pretty well set now on this motor going in either as it is and carbureted, or maybe with a Sniper 2 kit on it, into the IROC, and bypassing the ECM in the IROC. Not necessarily forever, but for right now, just because that's going to be the fastest and easiest way for us to get this car up and running and back on the road. And it'll be the easiest way for us to tinker with this and keep it going. And then we can sort of figure out what we want to do with the 305 or with a future engine along the way. There's just way too much that we'd have to do to this motor to get this TPI ready, just because it's an older small block motor. So it's just not worth it. You have to spend way too much on it. For the money that I have to spend to get this ready for a TPI, I could go out and buy a completely rebuilt long block 305. That just doesn't make any sense to me. So we're not going to do that. We're going to try to keep this on the straight path, but we are going to look into Sniper 2s because I think that would make things a little bit more easy. It's a throttle body fuel injection. It'll just make the car a little bit more drivable. Because it won't be carbureted, it'll be a little bit more predictable and self-learning. So it'll be easier to run in the cold and the warm and all that jazz.
Okay.
So more to come. stay tuned, and hopefully we'll see you guys next time. Please like and subscribe and take a look at our merch. We do have some new stuff coming. I don't have it yet on me, but it is coming. We have some red sweatshirts coming because I kind of like red sweatshirts, and it is the holidays and Christmas, and I've been thinking about that.
The Ferrari sweatshirt. That's right.
You only have that. And then we do have some knit caps that I made up because it's getting cold and it's going to be time for me to shovel. And so I'm going to have that stuff on my head too. So please take a look at the store. You can buy that stuff now and like and subscribe to the channel. We appreciate you very much, and we'll see you next time.